Germany's gold may no longer belong to it. That's the contradiction shaking Berlin. A nation that considers itself sovereign, wealthy, and protected, but a significant part of its national wealth is lying in a foreign vault, nearly 450 billion euros worth of gold. Over a third of it, exactly 1,236 tons, is stored in New York under American control. For decades, no one really questioned it. That was the rule. That was the trust. Today, this trust is cracking, and what's at stake here isn't just gold bars or central banks. It concerns you because when alliances become transactional, it's always the citizens who pay the price. Officially, nothing has changed. Unofficially, the debate is exploding within German political circles. Some talk about security, others about dependency, still others about a risk that remains unnamed. But here's the detail that changes everything. If this gold becomes a tool of pressure, who truly decides and who no longer has a choice? Officially, this isn't a crisis. No emergency statements, no dramatic votes, just a question circulating more openly in Berlin. Is it still reasonable to leave such a massive portion of Germany's national wealth abroad? The facts are simple. Germany has the second largest gold reserves in the world. A large portion is still stored abroad, in the US, but also in London and Paris. This system dates back to the Cold War, when divided Germany depended entirely on its Western allies for security and market access. Back then, no one questioned this arrangement. Today, the context has changed. Tensions between the European Union and the U.S. are mounting. Trade wars, sanctions, increasingly harsh political rhetoric. This debate is therefore not isolated. It's part of a broader reassessment of the transatlantic relationship. And the real question isn't where is the gold, but what does it reveal that we're only starting to worry about it now? A claim is gaining ground in this debate. Keeping this gold abroad is no longer just a technical choice. It's become a political risk. This is not a fringe slogan, nor an online rumor. Fact. Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann, president of the European Parliament's Security and Defense Committee, publicly called for Germany's gold to be repatriated from the U.S. and urged the government to act quickly. Not long ago, a statement like this would have been unthinkable in the dominant debate. This detail matters because it signals a shift. When a central figure in European security talks about gold, it's never just about vaults. Inference. It suggests that gold is now seen as a strategic asset exposed to geopolitical tensions. And now notice what's missing. No public guarantees from the U.S. No formal commitment reaffirming Germany's unconditional access to its reserves. Not a word to dispel doubt. In international relations, this silence is never neutral. It creates a gray area. And it's precisely in this space that distrust begins to take root. From here, the situation doesn't remain stagnant. It intensifies. What was once a latent concern becomes a normalized political topic. Fact. The German chancellor chooses his words with extreme caution. In front of the Bundestag, he insists that EU countries are partners and allies of the U.S., not subordinates. This phrase seems trivial. It's not. Inference. When a leader feels the need to publicly remind others that he is not subordinate, it means the question of hierarchy has already entered the debate. And this is not unprecedented. Throughout modern history, whenever states began to doubt the neutrality of their strategic assets, the issue was first minimized before becoming explosive. What's most troubling is the speed at which this discussion becomes normalized. What was once considered extreme now seems reasonable, normal, almost prudent. And here's the quiet reversal. It's no longer the idea of repatriating the gold that shocks, but the idea of continuing to do nothing. Then comes a much more disturbing fracture because it doesn't come from political opposition, but from the heart of Germany's monetary institution itself. Fact. A former chief economist of the Bundesbank publicly supported the idea that keeping such a large part of the nation's gold in the U.S. has become too risky. His argument is direct. The geopolitical context has changed, and strategic dependence on Washington is no longer sustainable. This isn't a radical. This isn't a provocateur. This is a voice from within the system. Inference. When this kind of discourse emerges from within the very structures meant to ensure stability, it means the fear is no longer theoretical. It's integrated into the calculations. And now, observe the central contradiction. Officially, the U.S. is a reliable ally, but in practice, political unpredictability, the deliberate use of sanctions, and the logic of economic pressure turn every foreign asset into a potential lever. This line changes everything. Gold stored in New York is no longer just a reserve. It becomes a negotiating tool, a reality that is not openly acknowledged but seems to be understood by an increasing number of decision makers. At this point, the signals don't come one by one. They pile up quickly. Fact, political leaders are now openly discussing the possibility that Germany may not have free access to its gold in the event of a major political confrontation. Fact, Michael Yeager, president of the European Taxpayers Association, publicly asks, in a serious crisis, would Berlin truly have control over its reserves stored in New York? Fact, he cites Donald Trump's unpredictability, his open willingness to use economic tools as political weapons, and even his provocative statements about seizing territories like Greenland. None of this is abstract inference. Seen from this angle, gold no longer rests in a vault. It becomes a form of silent pressure, a static asset, but charged with power. And this is where the pace quickens. This debate, once confined to political margins easily ignored, now moves to the center. Institutional defenses begin to crack. No one is talking about theory anymore. We're talking about scenarios, risks, losses of control. And one question begins to haunt the halls of power. What happens if this logic continues? And no one can stop it. At that point, the story is no longer abstract. It touches you directly. Because when states begin to doubt access to their own reserves, the consequences never stay confined to central bank vaults. Fact. Gold is described by several German officials as an anchor of stability and trust. It protects the currency, credit, and the state's ability to react in case of shock. Inference. If this anchor becomes uncertain, it's not the elites who absorb the shock first. It's households, businesses, savings, the cost of debt, fiscal maneuver margins. You don't need to own gold to depend on it. You already depend on it without seeing it. And that's exactly what makes this situation so uncomfortable. The debate is no longer ideological. It's practical, concrete. What happens the day a foreign political decision slows down, conditions, or complicates access to wealth that's supposed to be national? If this concern seems familiar to you, it's because you've seen it elsewhere. Comment below. And now the real question becomes impossible to ignore. How does a system allow such a vulnerability to still exist? The answer doesn't lie in a conspiracy or in a single decision. It lies in a mechanism. Fact. For decades, the system relied on a simple assumption. Western alliances were stable, predictable, and based on lasting trust. This assumption shaped where the gold was stored, how liquidity was guaranteed, and who controlled access in times of crisis. Inference. The problem is that the system was never designed for a world where partners become transactional, where economic pressure replaces cooperation, and where unpredictability becomes an assumed strategy. Gold abroad works as long as no one has an interest in using it as leverage. The day that interest appears, the vulnerability becomes visible. What's troubling is that this mechanism doesn't rely on brute force, but on ambiguity. Nothing needs to be confiscated. All that's needed is for access to become conditional, slowed, or politicized. And here lies the heart of the problem. Modern power systems no longer impose themselves through dramatic announcements, but through silent dependencies. Once installed, they are extremely difficult to dismantle without triggering a shock. From here, two trajectories begin to unfold, and neither is comfortable. Fact. Some officials believe that as long as Germany remains deeply integrated into the American security framework, with a lasting foreign military presence on its soil, any formal attempt to repatriate the gold would be blocked or discreetly discouraged. Inference. In this scenario, the debate continues, pressure mounts, but nothing really changes. The gold stays where it is, and dependence simply becomes more conscious. The other trajectory is more unstable. Fact. If Berlin officially raises the issue, the reaction wouldn't just come from Washington. London and Paris, who also hold part of Germany's gold, could interpret this move as a strategic rupture, a signal of political autonomy that's too abrupt. Inference. In that case, a simple technical request could turn into a European trust crisis. What makes this moment so tense is that both paths come with a cost. Inaction strengthens vulnerability. action risks escalation. And while decision makers hesitate, one thing is already happening. The next step is silently being prepared in the capitals involved. And this is where everything reframes. Fact. This debate has never really been about gold bars stacked in a vault beneath Manhattan. It's been about trust, control, and a state's ability to decide without asking for permission. For a long time, these questions stayed off the radar because the system worked, or appeared to, inference. But once doubt settles at the top, it doesn't disappear. It spreads. It changes how every decision is evaluated. Repatriating the gold might not be imminent. Maybe it won't happen this year or even the next. But the most important thing has already happened. The question has crossed into public debate. And when sovereignty, dependence, and vulnerability become normal topics, going back is nearly impossible. That's the real story. It's not the gold returning. It's the distrust setting in. And once it's there, it shapes everything that follows. If you want to understand where this leads and what it signals for the future, stay here. This is just the beginning.